And all of you decided you did not want to wake up with the pigs this morning because that's the other class that's being taught. So I appreciate that, and glad that you've come to be with us this morning. And we're going to be going, it's going to be a study. We're going to talk about Moses and Joshua, and kind of the subtopic is mentoring in the Old Testament that we'll go through. We're going to talk about some of that. As we get started, let's begin with a word of prayer. We'll ask for God's blessing on our class. Our Holy Father, we're bowing in your presence this morning and asking you, Lord, to open our eyes to see the wonderful things that you have in store for us in your word. And we pray that you'll give us an attitude and a heart of willingness to listen and to learn from your word and to be better able to put it into practice in our life and then take it out and live it before others and share it with others. We know there are a lot of folks going through a lot of difficult challenges right now, some within our own family here at Central, and many, many more in other places that are just suffering and experiencing difficulties. We're praying that you will relieve that, and we're praying regarding this pandemic that these things would continually improve rather than to get worse, and that the things that have happened would lead people more to an understanding or a realization or an understanding of their need for you. We thank you for Jesus, for who he is and what he's done for us. In Jesus' name we're praying. Amen. Okay, so for a long time, I've wanted to do a study of Moses' life, similar to what I did back a few years ago when we went through the life of Joseph. And when we went through the life of Joseph, one of the things that I encouraged you to do was to try to read it again for the first time. I know Moses' life and who he is, what he's done, very, very familiar to many of us, most of us, in fact. And so the hard thing for us to do when we go back and start looking at the Bible is to try to see what it was for them when they really experienced the things that they went through. I mean, when we start studying about Joseph, we automatically kind of jump ahead and say, well, it all works out fine in the end. And, you meant it for, he says to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And that's why everything just worked out okay. But Joseph didn't know any of that day by day by day. He didn't understand why he was sold into slavery. He didn't understand why he was taken down to Egypt. I mean, he begged his brothers not to do it, right? I mean, it wasn't like it all clicked and Joseph said, oh, I got this. I can handle this for the next 30 years. He didn't know. So he goes and he works for Potiphar, and everything's going along well. And he does the right thing, the good thing. And he spurns the advances of Potiphar's wife. So what happens to Joseph? Huh? Yeah, he gets thrown in prison. And so, do you think Joseph just said, it's all part of God's plan, I got it? No, he didn't know what was going on. I mean, he asked, remember when he reveals the dreams of the butler and the baker, remind Pharaoh when you get out that I'm the one who did this and that I'm not supposed to be here. And he forgets. And so for, 1 or 2 whole years, he stays in prison longer until the Pharaoh has a dream. I mean, these things didn't just click. And Moses doesn't understand, I'm persuaded, day by day. But we tend to jump ahead and we think, okay, well, yeah, we know about Moses, and he's going to go up on the mountain, he's going to get the law, he's going to come down, he's going to lead the people of Israel, and it's going to be this, and they lived happily ever after, kind of in our own minds to some degree. But to look at Moses day by day is what I want to challenge you with doing as we try to go through this this morning. And then we're going to talk about mentoring a little bit throughout the class this quarter and what that involves and so on. So let me ask you, first of all, let's see if we can't get you started a little bit. What is a mentor? What do you think a mentor is? Or what does a mentor do? What's that? Okay, guide someone. All right. What else? Okay, yep. Has to be somebody, I mean, for it to be a good mentor-mentee relationship, it's somebody you trust. Richard? Okay. Actually, I mean, yes, I think that's right to a degree, but they don't, a good mentor doesn't try to get them to be like them. A good mentor tries to get them to be all they can be, would probably be the better way. William? Okay. As a teacher? Okay. And so how does he do this? How does a mentor, what's the difference between a teacher and a mentor? Or a coach and a mentor? What's the difference? Okay. Yeah, that a mentor-mentee is a relationship that's normally built on, it was already mentioned, trust. That's an elemental part of that. That the mentee has to have trust in his mentor, that he or she is going to lead them, teach them, guide them, whatever, in the best way. And so there's a certain amount of trust because of what? I mean, what else is involved in a mentor relationship that requires trust? Okay. Well, okay, but I mean, why? Why do you need confidence? Why do you need trust in your mentor? Okay, because of following, but also there's a more opening up of my life with this person. See, I'm gonna talk. If I've got a good mentor-mentee relationship, I'm gonna say, I'm struggling with this aspect of my life. What would be the best way? How would you suggest? Whatever, so on and so forth. And so there's a certain amount of opening up of our lives that trust has to be involved in that. Mark? Okay, yeah, and it's normally because it's a side-by-side relationship. I mean, a good mentor-mentee relationship is a side-by-side. I'm going to do thus and so, and you can watch how I do this and develop your skills. And now I'm going to watch you do this and help you and direct you and so on and so forth. When? Yeah, you're right. It has to go both ways. A mentor is going to give knowledge, as William was suggesting, that there's a teaching aspect of this. The person who's the mentor is supposed to be one who has more knowledge, at least in this area. And so there's a teaching aspect of it. A mentor motivates. A mentor is going to provide encouragement as well as direction. That may be correction in a person's life or whatever. And they allow probably the most critical aspect is that they allow the mentee to walk alongside them and to view life in that way. I mean, that's how this relationship is going to develop. So here's what I want to suggest to you, and why this is so important, is because God is going to mentor Moses in a very unique and special way. And then Moses, some years later, is going to mentor Joshua. And then Joshua is going to mentor Israel to a certain extent, but what we notice is when Joshua doesn't pick a successor, as it were. And if you recall, what happens after Joshua dies and the people who were serving with Joshua, when they die, what happens? Yeah, Israel goes their own way, and we fall into this horrific cyclical process through the judges that happen after another. The people they raise up, they don't really know God. They don't have a relationship in that sense. There was some dropping of the ball. I look at this now at all the good that Joshua does. He doesn't have somebody walking alongside him, listening, learning, seeing, doing as he leads and directs. That we might say was a shortfall on his part. So we're going to look in the book of Exodus. So See if you can find that in your Bible. Okay? Exodus. It is in mine. Exodus is still in the Old Testament in mine. So start in the front and you won't have to turn very far at all. And you can look at your book here. You're going to see that hopefully we're going to get some discussion out of the class and as we go through some of these questions that we're going to look at. And so we're going to begin really in the first chapter and at verse 8. Then we'll go back in just a minute. We'll catch up and look back at the first 7 verses. But I want you to see this. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, look, he's saying to his people, that is the people of Egypt, he says to them, look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and it happen in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go out of the land. Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities of Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were in dread of the children of Israel. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service in which they made them serve with rigor. So here is this picture. How would the king before, who knew Joseph, as it says here, how would Israel been treated previously to this? Been treated well? Okay, that's pretty simple. Okay, as Ricky Ricardo would say, splain. Okay, splain a little bit. Okay, that's exactly right. So why would the Egyptians give this great land to the Israelites, the land of Goshen? What? Okay, yeah, as far as shepherding and so on, they were anathema to the Egyptian people to be a shepherd, because they stink. They hang around with sheep all the time. They're outside. Whatever, all these things that there was this aspect of not wanting to deal with them, and so it was kind of like, okay, we'll give you some land, but we're going to give you this land way over here. But it turned out to be some of the best land as far as the Israelites were concerned. And so that they grow, they continue to populate and make all of these great gains in Egypt. And so the Egyptian Pharaoh, this new Pharaoh, comes along and says, this may not be good for us. Because if there's a battle that breaks out, we've enslaved these people. If there's a battle that breaks out, it's going to be very likely that they join up with the enemy. And what's the problem with that? There are more of them than there are of us. And we won't have a chance. So what we need to do is really, really make it tough on them. We need to make it exceedingly hard on them. And of course, many of us have seen how hard that was when Charlton Heston had to come to the rescue and save, in the Ten Commandments, the movie. But here you have these Israelite people who are making bricks and building all of these great structures that the Egyptians want to build at this time. And their thought is, we'll make it so hard on them that they're going to go home at the end of the day and they're just going to crash in bed. They won't have any time for making babies. And so everything's just going to turn out just fine for us. But what happens? Yeah, the opposite. I mean, Israel continues to grow more and more and more and more. That they just make great. So how was that? How did that happen? Not how did it happen. I got it. I understand that. Yeah, I mean that God was providentially helping in this matter, and we need to see that God is bringing these things about or helping to create this situation. So look at that second question there under Israel suffering in Egypt. Had Jacob and his family, I want you to think about this for a minute. Had Jacob and his family made a mistake in coming down to Egypt during the famine? In other words, should they have stayed in Canaan and trusted God that he would take care of them? Because God, everything was centered around, I'm going to give you this land. And they had the land, and they were in the land. Why did they leave the land? Because of famine, okay? Should they have just said, God will provide, and God's going to take care of us? Okay, that's exactly right, yeah. That God did give a provision, and the provision was, you can go down here and you can buy food. And so they go down and they buy food, and what do they find? Voila, Joseph is down there. Joseph opens up an opportunity for them to all come down, all be provided for, all be taken care of. And so everything does work out. I was sitting in a class one time, this was years ago when we lived out in Washington State, and somebody brought up this point and said that that was just a lack of faith on Jacob's part to leave the land of Canaan. I'm persuaded it was God's answer to them to go down. Here is this provision, and here's this reconnection now with Joseph, your son, who's been down there that you didn't even know was alive. And so all of this unfolds in such a beautiful way. So putting the Israelites to work and making it so hard go ahead, Richard. Right, and that's exactly my point in bringing this up. I mean, because Matthew 6:33 says, seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and everything you need, all the things that you need in the context there, the food and clothing, shelter, take care of, all that will be provided for you, okay? So I can just become a Christian, and I can just sit back and say, I'm waiting for God to deliver. What's involved in that? Well, there's faith or stupidity may be involved in that. But I mean, I've got to get up and get to work, right? I mean, because there's other passages that say, if a man won't work, neither let him eat. So we have to be able to put all this into its whole proper framework. God will take care of me, but there are things that I have to do. And Richard's right. Sometimes we just think, well, God will take care of this. God's going to solve it all. Well, get up and do something to help it. Sometimes is what we need to do. Dang. Right. 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 I think that's a very, very valid point, and it's really important to understand that. That dovetails, at least in my mind, as you were talking. I thought about the passage in the book of Romans where it says that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord. And I've heard people say that means all things, everything. So if you're backing out of your driveway and your neighbor's little 2-year-old had run in back of your car and you hit your neighbor's child and the child's out now sitting in ICU, that all works together for the good. That verse has nothing to do with that. It's the idea of we need to keep that verse in its context. What God's talking about is his plan. All the things in Romans 8 8, is that right? That work together, it all works to God's plan. But what you're saying is right, that God didn't script out everything, that you were going to drive through your intersection and some drunk's going to run through and smack your car, and now you total your car. That wasn't a part of God's plan, that would happen. So what do I do in this situation? Well, I try to find whatever I can do in service to God and continue to move forward. That's what the Israelites do. They're in this situation not because God moved all of the chess pieces to make it work this way, that now they're going to be down there for all these years. They're going to suffer horrendously. Good Israelite people were going to die as a result of that. That's not what God's plan was. But God does give them a direction and an answer. But look, he puts them all to rigor. Okay, we're going to make you work so hard you will not produce any more children. Verse 15, then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew wives, because that didn't work, whom the name of the one was Shiphrah, the name of the other was Puah. Now, understand, there were not just 2 midwives. These are probably the head, the directors, whatever, of the midwives. Israel is way, way, way too big to just have 2 midwives. So these are probably the ones in command of the other midwives. He said to them, when you do your duties of a midwife of the Hebrew women, and you see on the birth stools, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, then you shall let them live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them, but saved the male children alive. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing and saved the male children? The midwives said to the Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. Was that true? No. Look at the next verse. Therefore, God dealt kindly with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew mightily, and so it was that the midwives feared God, and he provided for them. They told the Pharaoh this because they were God-fearers. They had some kind of respect, understanding, and belief in the Lord. So they said, we're not going to kill these children. Now, this is not unknown or unusual. This has happened in other countries as well, and it happened throughout history. We'll just kill all of the males, because if we kill all the males, then these women, these daughters, these girls are going to grow up, and they're going to have to find men, husbands among us, see? And so there won't be any more Israelite nation continuing on. That's the plan. We'll eventually get rid of them. They'll begin to dwindle, and it won't go on. So why would the king take this drastic measure? Go back up to verse 1 through 7. Now, these are the names of the children who came out of Egypt. Each man with his household came with Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and his brothers and all that generation, but the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. You can go back to Genesis chapter 46, verses 8 through 27, and there's an accounting of the 70 people of Israel who are in Egypt. Now, there are a lot of historians, a lot of Bible scholars, if you will, who will say that's absolutely absurd. There's no possible way they could grow from 70 to, how many are they when they come out of Egypt? Okay, it's over 1 million, probably closer to 2 million, maybe over 2, because the army, the standing army of men who were the age of 20 to 40 or thereabouts in good health was 603,550 men. So if we just say those men, the majority of them were married between 20 and 40 years old with no children. How big are we now? We're 1 million, okay? So now we take all of the older folks, all of the younger folks, all of the children. There are 2+ million people that come out of Egypt when they leave. They went in as 70 people. How did 70 people become 2 to 3 million people in these few years, really? It says God was with them and they multiplied, but it's a misunderstanding of back in Genesis chapter 46. In that listing, if I'm correct, there's only 2 women who are listed of the 70. Were there more than 2 women who went down? Yes, there were. There were wives, there were midwives, there were households, there were servants. There were hundreds of people, probably a couple of thousand people that started out. So the 70 is not just literally, it went from 70 to 3 million people in these few years. You know, they sure were populating. They had a bunch of John and Lacey Sapps that were having triplets, just boom, boom. You know, they were just popping out babies everywhere. That wasn't the case necessarily, because they misunderstand the numbers. And so, of course, if I'm going to shoot at the Bible and try to tear it down in some way, that's, of course, a way that they would do that. So Pharaoh commanded all the people, saying, every son, verse 22, every son who is born, you shall cast him into the river. Every daughter you'll let live. So, number one, strike one, it didn't work, making him work so hard. That didn't work. Number two, strike two, it didn't work telling the midwives to kill all the male children. So now what? He just announces to the people, you find an Israelite son, toss him out in the middle of the river. Okay, we're just going to kill all these boys. And so, I mean, he's desperate, the king is. Richard. Right. Yeah, but he's dealing with a tiny little town, but you're right, it's the same thing. He's so angered by this and that somebody is vying for his power, his position. So up to this point, what do we know about Moses? No, we don't know that. That's not in chapter 1. That's right. I mean, at this point, he's not around. Okay, that's what I didn't want you to do, Edwin. You got to stick right where we are. So we read it page by page. So we don't know anything about Moses yet. So let's get into chapter 2. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as a wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt, is how it is, or pitch, asphalt and pitch, and put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done of him. So what do we know about Moses now? We don't know anything. He hasn't told us it's Moses yet. Huh? We know he's a beautiful child, but we don't know that's Moses. Okay? All we know is a couple had a child. Okay? Now I want you to think, I mean, I realize I'm maybe overworking this, but I'm trying to get you to think. We only know what we've read. Okay? That's all we know is what we read. We don't know anything about Moses yet. Okay? So, look as it goes on. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came and drew, the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to go get it, and when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion for him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. Okay, so what do we know about Moses now? Nothing. Yay, all right, we got the right answer. Okay, good. We don't know anything yet. All right, so here this child is born. This couple sees the child, and it says that the mother sees the child and says, this is a beautiful child or a special child. So how did Jochebed, I'm jumping ahead and tell you her name, how did Jochebed know that this baby was a special baby? Aren't all babies special to their moms? Okay, but she had, that hadn't happened yet. I know I just read it, but when the mother sees the baby, it says she knew this was a special child or a beautiful child. Don't all moms feel that way? Well, shouldn't I say, by far the majority of moms feel that way? So why is Moses any different? Why is this child any different? Huh? Okay, as far as we know, we don't know anything about it. She just says, I can't do this this is a special child. So who's involved in this decision right now? As far as we know, mom, maybe mom and dad. And so we're going to make an ark. We're going to make a little boat, as it were, and we're going to put this pitch on. Why would you do that? Waterproof, exactly. So we're going to make this little basket. We're going to put the child in it. We're going to put a lid on top of this basket, okay? And we're going to go down to the river. And we'll put the baby in the basket in the river. Yes? Okay. Okay, so all right. So what about the other Israelite women? Had they tried that before? Yeah, we don't know. Okay, but you're right. A mother who is thinking right, loves the child, will do anything for the child. Okay, so she makes a basket, puts the baby in the basket. There is, within maybe the happenings here, an understanding that Jochebed has that maybe this is where the Pharaoh's daughter comes down. I don't know if he thought that, because that might be the scariest person to come down, right? The Pharaoh's daughter comes down and sees a Hebrew child. What's she likely to do? Just tip the basket over. What her dad said to do, right? Take all those male babies and throw them in the river. I don't know. It's speculation as to say, but she comes down, she sees the child now, and she feels compassion for this baby. Now, this is the Pharaoh's daughter. This is a princess. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, I'm sorry, I skipped over verse 7. Then the sister said to the Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse this child for you? So what's happening here? Yeah, there's a plan in motion. And who is the sister? Miriam, okay, his older sister Miriam. Does Joseph have any other children? Does Moses have any other siblings? Yeah, he has who? Aaron. Has he been born yet? Yes, he's older than Moses. And so there's an older brother, there's an older sister. She runs up to the princess, to this Egyptian, and says, shall I find a Hebrew woman to help take care of this child, to nurse this child for you? Which was normally about a 2-year process. And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the maiden went and called, voila, the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take the child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So wow. Mom not only gets to save the child, but what? She gets paid to save the child. Okay? This is pretty amazing how these coincidences just all happen like this. Is God behind any of this? I suppose God's behind it all right? And so the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go, and she calls the mother, brings the mother over and says, I'll pay you. So the woman took the child and nursed him, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, so he called his name Moses. So she called his name Moses. because I drew him out of the water. So now we know who Moses is. Okay, if we're doing this, just reading it a verse at a time, now we know. Oh, this child is Moses. We're talking about Mark. Right. Yeah, I mean, God sees and God knows this is going to be the one who's going to be the leader of Israel. I'm persuaded God's already got this plan. We don't know all of that. Apparently, Jochebed doesn't know all of that regarding her son. She just knows, I have this beautiful child. I'm going to do whatever I can, as Kay suggested, to save my child. And as it works out, he is nursed by his mother. She is paid. Some say that it lasted actually more than 2 years, but several years. He now is brought back. He's going to be brought back. But just think about the providential care. What about Moses' upbringing as a Hebrew? What does he learn or know that we find out later about this? Huh? Yeah, I mean, his mother teaches him, and he learns that, he's going to look different, first of all, most likely, enough so, but also the story must have been told that all of a sudden this princess who, she never did have a baby bump there, and all of a sudden now she's got a new baby, okay? Or she's got a couple of year-old child. And this child is going to be brought up in Pharaoh's household. So his upbringing early on is by his mother, and then he comes and he's going to be at the raised as he is brought to her, going to be brought up and raised in an Egyptian household. So, and his name Moses means to draw out or to bring out. He's drawn out. So it came to pass, it says at verse 11, that it came to pass in those days that when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren, and he looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of the brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So what do we know about Moses? He's a murderer. Okay? We know he is an Israelite. We know that he was brought up his early years in an Israelite home by his own mother. He is then moved into and becomes an Egyptian, and he is raised in the Egyptian household. And now we find that he's a murderer. Does he know it's wrong to do what he does? How do you know that? We haven't read that yet, but he does. What else does he do? That's what she said. Exactly. He looked this way and that way to make sure nobody was looking. Why? Why would you do that? Because you know you're not supposed to do what you're about to do. Okay? So he looks this way, he looks that way, he kills this Egyptian. So why didn't he just intercede? I don't know why he didn't, okay? Maybe he had grown up seeing the Egyptians so horribly treat one another and so on that he just figured in the heat of the moment, in the passion of the moment, I'm going to lash out, and he does what he does. Maybe it was this internal fire that he had about his own people and that this is unfair and this is unjust and I'm going to jump in and do this. Go ahead, Dave. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. And it's just like the Hebrew those midwives, they were told what to do. You just kill this baby if it's a boy as soon as it's born. And they said, we're not going to do that. Okay. So they defy the orders, and you're right in that regard. So Moses kills this Egyptian, and it says, and then it says he went out the second day, and behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who was, and he said to the one who did the wrong, "Why are you striking your companion?" And then he said, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Uh-oh. Somebody did see, or somebody does know because of what happened yesterday. And so Moses' answer wasn't, "Yeah, that's right, buddy, because I..." That's not what his answer is. What is his answer? His answer is next. "So Moses feared and said, 'Surely this thing is known. When the Pharaoh hears of this matter, heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well.'" So what does Moses do? He runs. Why does he run? Because Pharaoh is going to kill me for what I did. Pharaoh is after me. That's right. All right, Richard. Right? Yeah, and I think that shows a great response as far as relationship and what I have as a mom or a dad and a family and the children who are entrusted to me. Go ahead. Right. Sure. Yeah, I mean, either somebody just heard it or somebody saw it, but the news has gotten out, and that's why he's afraid. And so he doesn't just say, "Well, I'll man up and I can take this." I mean, he says, when Pharaoh heard about this, Pharaoh said, "Okay, I'm going to kill you." And so he runs for his life. He flees down to Midian, and it says that he sat down by a well. There's almost a sense of resignation in the way that's written. I don't know that's the case, but it's kind of what it sounds like. He went there and just kind of like, "Okay," and he's just, it's over. And the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water, and they filled the troughs with water, their father's flock. And then the shepherds came down and drove them away. And Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they went to Reuel, or Jethro, it said unto him, "How is it that you've come home so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and he drew enough water for us and watered the flock." So he said unto the daughters, "And where is he? Why is it that you've left this man? Call him that he may eat bread with us." Then Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave him Zipporah, his daughter, to Moses. And she bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." So has Moses forgotten? No, he knows who he is. He knows where he is. He knows why these things have happened. Names his son Gershom as a result of that. And it happened that in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel groaned because of their bondage, and they cried out, and the cry came to God because of their bondage, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. So it says that God remembered his covenant. Had God forgotten his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? How do you know? It says that he remembered it now. You ever forget things and then remember them later? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Gary's not sure. I think I've done that, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. So what's going on? Okay, it says he did, but it says he remembered. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that he called it up to mind right then. Actually, the Hebrew word, just one second, the Hebrew word means to mark so as to be recognized. Okay? To mark so as to be recognized. That is, that what does God do in this? He didn't forget it, as Edwin said, but what does he actually do? He brings it back in the sense of, I'm going to do something about this. That's what it means. He marked it. He's going to act on this. He is going to now move and motivate and operate within the Egyptian people and among the Israelite people. So, before we conclude, what do we know about Moses? Number one, he was a Hebrew. Number two, his life was spared because he was a beautiful child. Number three, he was adopted into Pharaoh's house, and he was raised in Pharaoh's house. By other scripture, we can learn more about that, but we will just leave it there. Number four, he knew his own heritage. Number five, we know he is a murderer. He kills a man. Number six, he runs for his life. Number seven, he gets married. Number eight, he has a son. And how do you feel about Moses right now with what you know? Is he the guy that you think, man, I'm telling you what, he is the leader of Israel. He's going to be the one that takes us out of bondage. He's not even in Egypt. He's in Midian. And so don't jump ahead in your thinking and your reasoning and just try to look at it and see, here is Moses. He's in Midian. He's married a Midianite woman, and it seems he's going to stay in Midian. That's where it seems like it's going to be as far as this point. Okay, anything else today? Yes, Senator. Right. Right. Yeah, and you're right. He does. He's always the redheaded stepchild. I mean, that's kind of what appears to be as far as Pharaoh is concerned. I thought I saw another hand. Oh, dang. Right. Yeah, and that's probably. I would assume that's a very good, interesting point there. He knows that he's a Hebrew. Moses does, and he acts upon his Hebrewness is why he does what he does. But when the people of Midian see him, they think he's an Egyptian. Why would that be? Probably dressed like an Egyptian, exactly. And so he would have the look of an Egyptian, and so it was an Egyptian guy. He helped us out. He watered the animals, and he took care of this, and so he stepped in for us. All right, so thank you for your attention, and go ahead and look at next week. I do have one more book up here right now, and then I'll print some more. Somebody need a book or want a book that didn't get a book? Going once, going twice? Okay. Oh, Edwin, all right. Thank you for listening, and look at lesson number 2 before next week.